generated. It's fueled by intent, and without that discipline you get people like Zhao and Ozai and Sozin. You get fire as domination, as conquest. You get 100 years of war and bloodshed. When Jong Jong finally agrees to train Aang thanks to a somewhat cryptic vision from Avatar Roku, we get what looks like the start of a classic training montage. But it's not. It's actually kind of the opposite, less destructive. By bending fire like water, he's not just showing restraint, he's reclaiming the element from the war machine that twisted it. It's pretty sick if you think about it. It marks our first real glimpse into the deeper nuance of
What's up, everyone? I hope you're having a blessed day. I've got another banging video for you today. And once again, it's one of my favorite shows out of the Last Airbender. We're going through one of the most underrated episodes of this series, and especially in book 1. This episode added more substance to a show was already starting to reach its full stride. And this is The Deserter. Let's get straight into the video.
It's just an amazing show, isn't it? Intelligent writing, brilliant characters, and a simple but elegant magic system that ties beautifully into both its overarching narrative structure and its spiritual, philosophical undertones. Across its 3 seasons, each named after the element our protagonist Aang must master, the show presents bending not just as a system of magic, but as a nuanced system of thought, each element representing a distinct way of living, shaped by its relationship to nature, culture, and the self. For example, the water tribes emphasize adaptability and healing, responding to life with patience and flow. The Earth Kingdom is grounded in endurance, resilience, and strength through unshakable conviction. And the Air Nomads teach freedom and detachment, a spiritual lightness both physical and emotional. But the Fire Nation? Well, the Fire Nation are the bad guys, right? It's kind of just that simple. At least that's how Avatar frames it early on. For a good chunk of season 1, fire is basically shorthand for evil. It's the weapon of the enemy, the thing burning down villages, the thing chasing Aang, Katara, and Sokka halfway across the world. And this makes sense, I think. Avatar is a fantasy kid.
Even just before we get around this episode, this video, I do want to highlight what's so great about Avatar here, and that is its way of not showing all elements or all nations are evil or bad, which obviously gets really highlighted more in book 3, where Aang and his gang go travel around the Fire Nation. But this episode is definitely one of the first ones where we're able to see fire in a different light, whereas it's not just needless destruction. There's so much more fire, more about fire, which is just more than destruction. Obviously, inherently may be the most destructive on paper, but as all elements, these elements are all in balance. They're all able to cause destruction as well as life. They all have that yin and yang to it, and no element is inherently bad or evil. It's all about the way. It's all about the user and how they use the power. The same fire that can burn a forest is the same fire that warms the forest up. The same fire that you can use to burn somebody alive is the same one that can cook a piece of food to eat it. Same fire, different utilization. And this episode is definitely one what definitely highlights this, which I do really like.
Show set during a war. We need clear stakes, clear threats, and fire is just such an easy visual symbol for all that. It's aggressive, it's loud, it's red and orange, and it gets everywhere. Seriously though, for a while in this first season, fire is simply framed as destruction, as domination, as the thing that needs to be stopped. And when almost every villain we meet can shoot flames from their hands, it's easy to buy into that. Sure, this two-parter who helps Team Avatar find Roku's shrine room. But overall, the cultural nuance and philosophical depth, the sense of identity and moral complexity we get with the other elements and nations, just isn't really there with fire. At least, that is until episode 16 of book 1, titled The Deserter, which is for my money one of Avatar The Last Airbender's most intelligent, thoughtful, and underrated episodes. Yes, because it's a great piece of storytelling in its own right. Yes, because it's clearly a homage to one of my favourite films of all time, Apocalypse Now. But I'm mainly referring here to how it deepens the moral texture of the show and challenges the simplicity of its early world building. The episode opens with Aang, Katara, and Sokka walking into a Fire Nation colonial village in the northwestern Earth Kingdom, the first of its kind we've seen in the show so far. And this glimpse into everyday life under the shadow of imperialism is our first hint that the episode is interested in something a little more complex than usual. You can really feel the weight of occupation throughout this scene, most notably the puppet show being put on for the children, which is kind of genius in my opinion. This is literally the first time we see a non-silhouette depiction of the series' main antagonist, Ozai, and it's in the form of juvenile propaganda. The image of Ozai is being shaped long before any of these kids are old enough to understand what he really represents. And the show doesn't even try to underline this with any kind of moral lesson. No, it just lets the moment sit. It's really quite chilling. Anyway, eventually Team Avatar are found out, and they escape with the help of Che, who explains to them that he serves a living legend named Jong Jong the Deserter, who defected from the Fire Nation army. We haven't even met the episode's titular character yet, but the mere mention of this guy's existence seriously challenges the image the show has built around the Fire Nation thus far, because up until now we've only seen fire as a source of pride, a symbol of strength, loyalty, and power. But Jong Jong's defection complicates things massively. It suggests shame, disillusionment, the idea that not everyone inside the system believes in what it's doing, or even in what firebending has become. And that alone shifts something.
power
forces us to
isn't
stop seeing the
about
Fire
the
Nation
power
as a monolith.
itself, it's about
We are not a
who
monolith!
wields the power.
Anyway, by the time we finally meet Jong Jong, the anticipation has been carefully built. The episode doesn't rush his introduction. He's talked about with reverence and mystery, but also fear. And when we do finally meet him, sat alone, surrounded by candlelight, half in shadow, the guy does not disappoint. To me, Jong Jong is perhaps Avatar: The Last Airbender's best one-off character. I mean, yes, he turns up again in Sozin's Comet for a glorified, albeit badass cameo, but this is the only time we really get to sit with him. And what makes him so compelling is that he doesn't fit the usual mentor mold. He's not playful like Iroh, eccentric like Umi, or bound by tradition like Pakku. No, he's tortured, scarred, both physically and spiritually, philosophical to the point of exhaustion. Aang is excited to learn firebending, and we are excited to watch him learn. But Jong Jong refuses to teach him, not because Aang lacks talent, he's the Avatar, but because he hasn't yet mastered the deeper internal discipline firebending requires. To master the bending disciplines, you must first master discipline itself, he says. Now, that line might sound simple, but in context, it's deeply important, because fire, unlike the other elements, comes from within. It's not borrowed from the environment or redirected from some external source. It's generated. It's fueled by intent. And without that discipline, you get people like Zhao and Ozai and Sozin. You get fire as domination, as conquest. You get 100 years of war and bloodshed. When Jong Jong finally agrees to train Aang thanks to a somewhat cryptic vision from Avatar Roku, we get what looks like the start of a classic training montage. But it's not. It's actually kind of the opposite. And I just think it's so cleverly done. Because Aang, being a 12-year-old, just wants to shoot fire from his fingertips. Like every firebender who's been chasing him across the world for the past 15 episodes. But Jong Jong's instructions and teachings are far less exciting. It's all about stillness and breathwork and feeling the sun. It's actually kind of boring. And this is all supposed to play on our expectations and desires.
Like to notice
because we want to see Aang learn firebending just as much as he does. We want progress and spectacle. We want him to be able to use the powers.
Jong Jong's techniques, you can really see the discipline element from earthbending, from his stance of how he fights. It really just showed that the audio learned element is very integral to what makes it being a great Avatar. Aang is under the notion of learning firebending as if he's whilst treating it like airbending, that freedom, that expressiveness, but he can't probably do that without first mastering Earth, which is all about stillness, control, discipline, perseverance. That's why the element order is very, very specific to how Avatar should learn it. Aang's freedom and expressiveness works well to easily translate to being a waterbender and adaptability. That's why someone like Roku, when he was learning, he first learned airbending first because he already has an understanding of the stricter capacity of firebending, but now he's just going to airbending, which is much easier in terms of it's just firebending, but more free, but less destructive. And that's why it's important for somebody, that's why like an earthbender naturally learns firebending next, purely because they already have the notion of discipline, stillness, and now they have it be able to translate into firebending because they have the prerequisite knowledges, which is a nice little touch of how the elemental cycle all works in perfect harmony.
His enemies against them, to fight fire with fire, literally. And I think we're supposed to find all the philosophical, meditative stuff about breathing and feeling the sun a bit of a letdown. And in the end, both the audience and Aang are punished for this when the young Avatar ends up burning Katara due to his hastiness and lack of respect for Jong Jong's teachings. This isn't just a dramatic turn, it's a thematic one. We're being punished for our impatience, just like Aang is. Because firebending, unlike the other elements, is driven entirely from within. It begins with breath, with will, like with intent. It's not about redirection or balance or flow, it's about what you generate and whether you can control it. And Aang, still impatient, still young, still performing, clearly can't. When he burns Katara, it's not framed as an accident. It's a failure, a direct consequence of rushing to unlock power without understanding it. And that failure sits heavy, not just for Aang, but for the viewer, because ultimately, it's this same mix of ego, impatience, and unchecked desire for power that started the entire conflict of the show in the first place. Katara runs off and eventually discovers that she has healing abilities, something Jong Jong is envious of. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure this is the only moment in the entire series where a bender wishes they could bend another element instead, and I think it says a lot about Jong Jong. His entire perspective around firebending is clearly framed by his trauma and guilt. He sees it not as a gift, but as a curse. And look, while I don't think the show 100% agrees with Jong Jong's philosophy on firebending as we go on to learn more about the martial art in later seasons, the Deserter does definitely change and deepen the way we look at firebending. This isn't just a combat skill, it's a mindset, a philosophy, a moral stance. And the episode draws that line clearly through the contrast between Jong Jong and his former student, Zhao, who represents how the Fire Nation, through militarism, through conquest, have warped firebending into something volatile, performative, and reckless. A far cry from how ex-Fire Nation soldiers Jong Jong and Iroh discuss the art.
Power in firebending comes from the breath. That is why you must master proper breath control. No, power in firebending comes from the breath, not the muscles.
Again, think back to Jong Jong being envious of Katara's waterbending and healing abilities, or how Iroh learnt to redirect lightning by studying waterbenders, and then watch how Jong Jong actually firebends. I don't think he shoots a fire blast once. No, it's much closer to waves. to waterbending. And I think that's the point. Jong Jong is trying to unlearn the dominant firebending ideology, to reconnect it to something calmer, more internal, less destructive. By bending fire like water, he's not just showing restraint, he's reclaiming the element from the war machine that twisted it. It's pretty sick if you think about it. It marks our first real glimpse into the deeper nuance of firebending, something the show explores even more in episodes like the Firebending Masters. It's also no coincidence that when Aang eventually agrees for Zuko to be his teacher, it's partially because Zuko, like Jong Jong, recognizes that fire isn't just power, it's something dangerous, and something that demands discipline and restraint. And all this thematic, philosophical, and spiritual tension surrounding firebending culminates in the climactic duel between Aang and Zhao, a classic Avatar The Last Airbender third act, which ties everything together in a way that feels both cathartic and earned. After Jong Jong delivers what is surely the most impressive non-comment enhanced firebending display in the entire series before disappearing into the woods, Zhao squares up to Aang and the battle commences. But this isn't your standard fight, because while Zhao sees fire as domination, as brute force, Aang approaches it with something else entirely. Avoidance, stillness. He doesn't strike back, he doesn't retaliate. No, he just lets Zhao exhaust himself, dodging each reckless attack, using his opponent's aggression and warped understanding of firebending against him, until the Admiral has quite literally set his entire fleet ablaze. A perfect metaphor for how easily fire can turn on its wielder when driven by ego instead of control. This is not a flashy victory for the Avatar. No, it's a quiet, philosophical one. The kind that could only come after everything we've just seen. Because what this fight reveals is that Aang, the goat, is actually... because what this fight reveals is that Aang has actually been listening. He's internalized Jong Jong's warnings, not just about fire's danger, but about what it demands: control, intention, balance. And even though Aang isn't ready to wield fire himself, he now understands the stakes of that power in a way he simply didn't before. And we, the audience, learn a similar lesson. Yes, about the complex cultural nuances of the Fire Nation and firebending that just weren't really present before, but also about the nature of power itself. About how true strength isn't found in domination or display, but in self-mastery. Overall, The Deserter is, in my opinion, one of Avatar The Last Airbender's best and most underrated episodes. It really is a perfect example of the sheer maturity the show was capable of at its peak, challenging the black and white morality Season 1 often leans on, and introduces us to something much more layered, firebending not as evil but as volatile, something that demands restraint, discipline, and understanding, an ancient art that is incredibly dangerous when fueled by ego, impatience, or pride. Through Jong Jong's philosophy, Aang's failure, and Zhao's downfall, the episode begins to slowly peel back the layers of firebending, which is for me maybe the most nuanced of all the bending disciplines, and in doing so, it quietly shifts the moral framework of the show itself, from a story about fighting back to a story about how. But that is going to be it for now. I love talking about this incredible show. It really is one of my favourite things to do, and I now can confirm that production of my long-awaited review and ranking of Book 2 Earth has commenced. I cannot give any promises on when it will be out, only that it should be finished before George R.R. Martin releases The Winds of Winter. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. Please let me know what you think of The Deserter in the comment section, and what episode of Avatar you think deserves more love. And I will see you in the next one. Have a great day.
Good video. This is like, I believe this is like the second episode, or second time I've read it to somebody speak about The Deserter, and it's so true. When it adds, what I really wanted to highlight is the part where it says it takes away like the black and white nature of the fire, but adds more nuance to it to give us a new open perspective of what firebending is. Because at the end of the day, Avatar as a series, for world building, is all predicated on the idea of balance, yin and yang. Nothing is inherently evil, nothing is inherently good. It's all about finding a balance in all things, where somebody can become the ideal and ideal person when you combine everything. The same destruction, the same way fire can be used the same way fire can burn to kill an enemy is the same way fire burns to cook a meal. The same fire, what's a good example? The same fire, what can be used to burn down the forest, can be used to burn some wood to heat up to prevent you from freezing to death. It's all relative. No tool is evil. It's about the wield of the tool and how they choose to use it. And that's one of the beautiful things about Avatar and the nuance in the world building and the framework it provides in morality and balance. Morality and duality, yes, what I'm looking for. But yeah, a great series and always something to gather from these kind of episode breakdowns. But that was the video for me today. Like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know what you thought about this video. If there's a specific video or a specific episode of Avatar you want me to look at and give my own personal breakdown, I'm more than happy to do so. Just let me know what your favorite is down in the comments below. But that's been me for today. Like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, ciao.